Hey everybody, today we are talking about Apple Turnover Murder by Joanne Fluke. Apple Turnover Murder is yet another murder mystery that Hannah Swenson has got herself wrapped up into. The idea of this story is it is in the summertime and they are doing kind of a charity fundraiser 3 to 4 day event that is going to go to some charities, foundation things that I don't remember the details of. But the things that are going to be occurring for these events for the charities and to raise money is going to be a talent show on one night. There's also some like races and different events going on the other days, but the talent show is the main one because Hannah ends up getting wrapped up into it, and all three events she's wrapped up into it by needing to provide some pastries. It turns out that they want to try to find something else other than just her cookies that they could provide to have her own like area booth that everyone at the events, if they get hungry, they can go and get a pastry. And so the idea is to do apple turnovers. This recipe is actually Marge's recipe, which I believe is actually Lisa's mother-in-law, I think is who Marge is, if I'm remembering correctly. And so it's not actually Hannah's recipe, which I find interesting because this recipe seems like it's gonna be the easiest one to do. And that's because I've made apple turnovers before. So looking over this recipe, it looked pretty familiar to me. And it didn't seem like nearly as complicated as all the other recipes I've made in terms of like just quantity of ingredients and time and baking and all of that. Like the plum pudding took like 70 minutes just to cook, plus 30 minutes to soak before you cooked it. It took hours to do that. This, however, is just preparing the apples, putting them into some puff pastries, and then cooking them for like 20 minutes, and then that's it. And it's only gonna make like 8. So it's very much more my style of baking in my small home in which we do not need dozens and dozens of servings of things. So we're going to be making apple turnovers today while we talk about why Hannah is involved in a talent show, because she's involved in it not just in having her pastries available to eat, but she's also participating in it. And of course she's gonna find a body like she usually does. So we will go ahead and get started with peeling and coring these and getting them cut up so we can start baking them. And while I do that, I will tell you the story furthermore. So I think it would be a good start of explaining this story by going back a little bit. There is a person named Bradford Ramsey who is a poetry professor at a college, and he's actually somebody that Hannah was involved with. Actually kind of fell hard for him when she was a student there, and it was very embarrassing for her because she found out that he was like married, and so she like ended things. And well, I'm pretty sure she actually just dropped out of college after that, and she was just really embarrassed, so she didn't tell anybody about the fact that she was dating someone like that. Years later, turns out that this person is now back in town. He's doing another college class course, and her younger sister Michelle is involved in this class, and Hannah kind of like warns her about him, but she doesn't want to admit that she had relations with him. So she has like basically told nobody about this. And so she's trying really hard to tell Michelle to like kind of be wary of him without like giving things away. So he's also, and I said that there was a talent show, and that's one of the charity events. And the reason that Hannah gets roped into it is because her Lisa's husband needs a assistant to do his magic tricks and his magic show for the talent show. He has one, but she ends up getting really sick, and so Hannah in a previous book filled in for him before, And so he reaches out and he's like, I'm sorry to ask you this, but can you please be my assistant again? And she was like, oh, because she doesn't really want to do it. And she also had, there's this story of the last time she did it, she had this like hideous purple dress that like clashed with her red hair. And so she was like, great. And she got rid of the dress. So she's like, well, I'm going to need to get a new dress again. And she didn't have time, of course, because she's baking and everything. And you know, because that's her like actual job she supposedly does. So then a bunch of ladies help go try to find some stuff from just like the thrift store, and they bring back stuff, and one of them is this purple dress that somehow made its way back to her, and it ends up being the only one that fits, so she has to wear this again. But anyway, that's not important, really. It's just funny. She has to be involved at the talent show like rehearsal thing that they're doing right before the real thing. And so they're there, and turns out that Bradford Ramsey, her ex, ends up being the one that is in charge of the like host, the person, what are they called? They don't call it, there's another word for it, not host, but the MC, maybe that's what I'm thinking of. Well, either way. So that's the plan, is for them to rehearse and stuff, and he announces all of the people and stuff, and he kind of acts like he doesn't like remember her. So she was like, oh, thank goodness he doesn't like remember, but also that's really sad, since they were involved and he didn't even really recognize her. But then later, like the same day at this rehearsal, he says something like, it's been so nice seeing you again, Hannah. Like something that obviously triggers her to know that, oh wait, he does recognize me still. And so that trips her up, and she's like, stay away from my sister. And she's like, she says something like, you know, stay away from my sister or I'll kill you or whatever, like something like that, or you'll wish you were dead, or I don't know, something that was, you know, people say that don't really mean. And when she says this, Herb actually kind of overhears, and then she feels really bad because she didn't want him to hear that, and now he's probably like, what the heck's going on? It's so obvious, like the second that she says that, you know he's gonna be the one that ends up being killed, and then she's gonna be a suspect because Herb overheard her saying that. And that's exactly what happens. And she does end up finding his body like usual. Like she goes, there's like an intermission or a break or whatever, or she's waiting for the intermission to be over. And actually, I think this happened during the real performance of the thing, because there's an intermission, and she goes out. She just wants to avoid him, and so she's kind of hiding until the intermission's over. So she's in the dressing room, like waiting to hear the sound of him saying, all right, time to pick up the second act. And like he's not, and it's like getting past the time that the intermission is supposed to last. She's like, what the heck? So she goes, and she's like really angry still at him. So she goes to try to find him, and he's like sitting in a chair backstage. And she's like, what are you doing? Like, get up. We're supposed to be talking right now. You're supposed to be announcing everything. Like, what are you doing? And then he doesn't respond. So she's like, what are you doing? And she like goes to like pat his shoulder to be like, hello, did you fall asleep? And then he like falls out of the chair. And she's like, oh my gosh. Here we go again. I actually really hate that this is how this went down. I really did not want him to be the one that died. I just thought, he's a crappy person because he's obviously done this to many women, where he like, you know, gets married and then he cheats on them, and then he gets divorced, and then because they find out or whatever, and he just moves on to the next young girls at the college and stuff, and like woos them with his poetry, which is not even all the way his, because he like steals things from other poets and stuff too. And so it's like, he's a really dirtbag person, so you know, that might be making you think, well, he deserved it then. But really though, does it have to be the most like obvious? And then Hannah doesn't have that issue in her life anymore. She doesn't have to deal with him being around, or woohoo, great. But like, she doesn't always have to have everything go her way, you know? Like sometimes there can be things that happen that can be, you know, having him back in the picture for her was stressful for her and gave her conflict and made her have to figure out how she's going to resolve this and make things work. And she'd probably have to tell some people about him. And so much of that is just solved by him becoming like being killed and dying. And so I just kind of wish it could have been somebody else that died, because it's like, he was a little bit in the other books. He was mentioned in one book a long time ago, and then he was in like the more recent last book a little bit. And so it was like, oh, we're getting this new character, but then he exits the stage so fast, so soon afterwards, that it's like we can't even get used to a new character before it's like, you know, that the new characters in these books are just gonna end up dead because she's probably never gonna kill off an important person. I don't know, maybe she will one of these days, but she hasn't yet. For this recipe, I used 2 Granny Smith apples and 1 Gala apple so that it could have just like a little bit of sweetness with the tart of the Granny Smith. That's what's in here. And I was just looking over the recipe, and it doesn't actually have you pre-cook them before you put them into the puff pastries. I think this is very interesting because I've always done it on the stove a little bit before putting it in the oven. So I'm going to do half of them the way that the recipe says to, and then the other half I'm gonna cook them for just a couple minutes on the stovetop because I don't know, I'm just worried because I've never done it that way before. So I'm just gonna do half and half to see what's the better method. Another thing to note, this recipe calls for dried cranberries, and I'm also gonna only do that on like one of them because why are we adding cranberries? Why are we adding any other fruit to apple turnovers to begin with? And why dried cranberries? What is this obsession with all these dried fruit lately? Like, I just don't understand why it needs it. Like, what's the point of adding that into something that is, I mean, I just don't really, cranberries are fine. And craisins are fine. I just, like, with my apples, with my apple turnover, I don't know, I'd prefer it to just be apples. So to stay as authentic as possible with the recipe, I am going to have one of them with cranberries in it for our taste test so we can actually see how that is, because yeah, I don't even think I've ever had a turnover with that combination before, so might as well give it a try and see how it is. But I also just want most of them to not be like that. So we're going to add a bunch of seasonings now to the apples, and then we can put them onto our puff pastries, which I will roll out, and then we will take a little, like 1/4 of a cup or so of our apples, and we will put them into the center of the puff pastry. We will cover it. We will put some egg wash on, which, because of the situation with eggs these days and their price, I'm not gonna do egg wash. I'm gonna do like a substitute with like water mixed with like a little maple syrup or something like that, and then use that instead. And then we just have to cook them after that, pretty much. So that's what we will do, and then we will continue our story. Hannah's found another body, and I've already vented the other reasons why I think it's unfortunate that that's the person that died. But she's a suspect, so she has to go and explain everything, what happened, and then of course, after she's like cleared, she goes right on to trying to figure out who it really was. There's a couple of suspects, like just people that knew him, people that worked with him. I feel like this part was very like, it took a really long time in this book before he was killed. And then the ending kind of goes a little quickly, and I feel like the figuring out part of it just wasn't as interesting as other books have been in that process. I feel like it just seemed like there wasn't a lot of good leads or good evidence or good, like, the way we find out. I guess overall it was just a little underwhelming compared to the other ways that Hannah has been in trouble at the end of figuring out a murder. Of course, it's not her, so she's in the clear and all that. Things work out to be just fine, like usual. Nothing really stood out to me that much this time. And also there was like this weird like side story of somebody trying to hire Bill to like move to like Florida or somewhere far away, and Andrea's freaking out. She's like, I don't want to move away from all my family and everyone I know here, but the job offer's amazing and they keep offering him more and more things. That's like crazy. Like, how is he ever gonna like turn the stuff down? He's not going to, and I'm gonna have to move away. And like near the end of the story, Hannah's like, have you ever thought to actually call this company and ask them, like have they always just called you? How do you know it's not a scam? If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Like, have you just actually spoken to anyone there, like by you calling first? And she's like, I never thought about that. So then they end up calling and they're like, yeah, we've never reached out to you. So it ended up being a scam after all. So it was kind of like, what was the point of that whole side story besides having Andrea just whine the whole time about feeling like she's gonna have to move away from her family and friends, and then it turns out she actually doesn't because the whole thing was fake? Yeah, I didn't really think about that until just now. Like, what was the point of that? That just seemed kind of like a pointless thing. So, yeah, okay. Also, there's something weird going on with Norman. He's been very distant. Like, his mom got remarried at the beginning of this book, and after that, he's just kind of seemed a little weird, a little off to Hannah, and he says it's fine and not to worry about it, but he's still not giving her any details about what's going on. And so we have this weird thing. And then Mike also is like, you know what, I'm gonna be honest and real with you, I love you, but you should just marry Norman because he's stable, he's good to you. You know how I've been lately in these last several books, and how I feel like you deserve better. I feel like you should just be with Norman and I will accept that. And so then Hannah's like, what the freak? And so she has to deal with that now. And then she's like, I don't even know how Norman feels about me anymore because he's been being weird lately. So that is where the boy situation is, and it's Wedding Cake Murder, that book is coming up, but it's still like 5 books away. So we're still gonna have to deal with this crap for at least 3 more books until I feel like she's finally gonna get engaged to someone. And then finally a book where she gets married. Like, overall, not my favorite out of these. There's been some that I've really loved, the ending on how she has to get herself out of trouble. There's certain things that I think are like funny and that work. But yeah, this one, aside from like the recipes all seem pretty nice, and this, I'm happy to be making this. That's the best part of it, is just the apple turnovers, really. All right, they're all done, so we are going to give them a taste. It said to cook them for 25 minutes, and I checked it at 22 minutes, 3 minutes early, and they were very much already done. So I pulled them out. Luckily, I did this in 2 batches, so the second batch is put in for 18 minutes, so I can check it at that spot and make sure that they're not getting too dark on the top. And I can just scrape this off probably pretty easily. The bottom is not bad. Now, normally I would put like a icing on this, a simple icing. I don't believe that it called for a glaze or an icing. I'll double check later, but because I'll probably do some icing on the other ones later. But for now, I'm just gonna taste this one just how it is. Actually, I think it's this one. Yeah, this one that I put the cranberries in. All right, so here's what it looks like. Could you hear how, like, wow, that was a really cool sound. Okay, this piece has a cranberry in it, so let's go for it. All right, it's great. It's very delicious. The craisin actually didn't bother me at all. I barely noticed it. The apples taste really good. The seasoning is really good. I think I added a little extra cinnamon just because I like cinnamon with my apples. And I think that it could use the glaze. I mean, it's not super sweet, the crust on this, even though you sprinkle sugar on it. It's still not overwhelming with the sweetness, in my opinion. So if you wanted it to have that icing on it, just to create kind of more of a saucy, like just to make it so it's less dry, is what I'm trying to say. I definitely think that I would like it better with that glaze on there. Yeah, it's delicious. Aside from the fact that they burned on the top, just cut the time down. And it also could be because I did not use egg for my egg wash. I used water mixed with a little bit of maple syrup. I didn't even put that much though, so maybe, I don't know, I feel like that's probably what it was, but it could have also just been that it just doesn't need 25 minutes in my oven. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you, and I will see you in our next baking book review. Bye.